Is a very profitable business. I think we've said it's around 60 million in revenue, 20 million in profit. It sounds like Murdoch came along and said, no, actually, I'd like to have the audio business and New York and Vox.com.
Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome to the Powers That Be. If it's Monday, it's Media Monday. Happy Memorial Day. I hope everyone is having a hot dog today. Programming note, today, Jon Kelly and I are going to do the usual Media Monday. We're going to dig into Vox Media, parts of it at least, being sold to James Murdoch. We're going to talk about Bezos making some comments about the Washington Post and profitability. We're going to talk about a leadership change at Business Insider. This will be a grab bag episode about digital media. But because it's the weekend, we're taping 2 episodes, and tomorrow you're going to want to stick around because Jon Kelly is here again for a politics episode. We're going to talk about the DNC autopsy fiasco. We're going to talk about Spencer Pratt's mayoral campaign out here in Los Angeles, where I live. You're not going to want to miss Jon Kelly talking about politics. It's always fun for me, at least. But first, Jon, happy Memorial Day weekend. The summer is here. Are you going to be on the road every weekend coaching Little League Baseball?
Well, that's definitely what I was doing over this weekend in the rain. There's a lot of that in the near future, and then it fortunately subsides. But this is my older kid is going to Cooperstown this July, so I'm gonna have a lot of time in Oneonta ahead of me. So yeah, thoughts and prayers.
Great. Are you going to be doing some private lobbying on behalf of Pete Rose?
You know what? Not for this episode and not for this air. But I have I was at a local fundraiser in Montclair last Saturday, and I sat next to my buddy Harold Reynolds, who told me the funniest Pete Rose story that you will ever hear in your life, and I'll tell it to you when no one's listening.
Oh, my God. I can't wait. Oh, my God. This is so good. Okay. Enough about the Cincinnati Reds. As usual, I need to mute myself when I bring up them. Let's start with James Murdoch. So James Murdoch's media company, it's called Lupa, which means she-wolf. Dylan wrote about this. I think Dylan might have broken the news. No, Dylan didn't break the news for once on this, but this has been percolating for many weeks. Dylan's got good reporting on it, of course. James Murdoch last week closed the deal to buy New York Magazine and a few of Vox Media's brands along with their podcast business. Let me read you the details here. This is from Dylan. This is last Wednesday. James Murdoch announced he had landed his long-anticipated $300 million plus deal to acquire New York, Vox Media Podcast Network, and Vox.com. Now, I want to get into what he didn't buy because I also find that interesting. Vox president Ryan Pauly will take over a new standalone company, think Versant, containing the digital assets left over from the deal. Eater, Pop Sugar, SB Nation, The Dodo, The Verge. I know you're a huge Dodo fan. Look, we can break down all of this. There's obviously the family psychodrama of the Murdochs. Rupert once owned New York Magazine. James has always kind of liked to play ball in intellectual spaces. I remember as a millennial, Raucous Records and his involvement there. But he wants to own a writerly magazine. He wants to be back in the game, etc. But some of these digital media brands that he's not buying used to be popular, valuable, maybe overvalued. But, when I was at CNN under previous ownership, SB Nation, I think we had some partnership there. That was like an up-and-coming sports brand. The Verge, I feel like The Verge, despite being ad-supported, has taken on this patina of being like prestigious and valuable, even though it's probably not. Why were these brands left behind and others picked up in your mind?
Well, I don't think any of this is a secret, right? And you pointed out that the deal has not closed. I think that they're in the exclusive period now, so I presume it'll close over the next 2 months or so. And I think Jim Bankoff himself acknowledged as much. He did Peter Kafka's podcast, which I think is probably the most. It was somewhere in between the most forthcoming he's going to be, and also a bit of corporate theater too, because obviously Peter works for him. And he had a good answer that he tried to spin about how these other brands are profitable, which is, I'm sure that, of course, that hopefully is true, and that they're desirable too. But they're not moving along because Jim realized at some point that he had to split the atom. Galloway had actually a good term for this
Galloway, who should note, is part of the Vox podcast network with Kara.
He is, and there's an interesting detail I want to get there in a moment. But he basically recognized that, or he pointed out that Jim Bankoff, the CEO of the company, had done sort of non-accretive M&A construction on the company, right? He bought a lot of things that didn't make any sense together. So you're right. He started this journey by starting SB Nation, which was basically a kind of loose confederation of blog sites, on the internet 15 years ago. Like there was an Oakland A's blog site, and there was a Cincinnati Reds. So it was like the V1 of what would become, in a better strategy, The Athletic, but they didn't take that strategy. And Jim became acquisitive. I think they created The Verge with that guy Josh Topolsky, who ended up leaving for a very short stint at Bloomberg, and he sort of had a peripatetic career. After that, they created Vox with Ezra, who then also left, and then they bought the Pop Sugar assets after they had real value. They bought the Dodo and the Group 9 assets. And then they bought New York. And Jim realized they had to split it up, that the parts were more valuable than the whole. Originally, Jim's had this relationship with a number of the team at Versant. Jim comes out of ad sales. And I think Versant was interested in the audio business, which, I think we've discussed the numbers here in the past, is a very profitable business. I think we've said it's around $60 million in revenue, $20 million in profit. I think that their plans see that getting to $100 million. The plans are aggressive, and Jim will be accountable for them now that he's staying. But it sounds like Murdoch came along and said, no, actually, I'd like to have the audio business and New York and Vox.com. I know that Dylan has been criticized in the past, and I have too for my performances in the show, for saying there was a convenience discount to this deal. But I think what I just described is exactly that, a convenience discount to bring the price up to a little over $300 million. So why are the underinvested, underloved assets staying with Ryan? It's because there's really no market for them, right? These are assets that are dwindling quickly. I think in an AI universe, we're going to see they're going to dwindle even further. Ad-supported, internet-based media is a very challenged asset class, Peter, and I think this is a proving ground for Ryan. I presume the next step is to run them for profit and then to try and exit there to in some sort of like Authentic Brands Group style motion, right? Whether that's towards Penske, who took out a minority stake in the overall entity, or to a Ziff Davis or someone else. But they can run at a profit for as long as they can maintain them that way. But it's hard to see the value of these assets in a post disintermediated world, right? Like, remember when these brands started, people went to websites to read content, and then we all went to social media platforms to get the content through there. That doesn't really happen the same way. Google is, has turned off its switch. So these are really, really, really challenged brands.
Yeah, I was going to say and mention until you brought it up that Google last week, in a huge change, said that they're going to change the search bar, which is so many people's portal to the internet, to emphasize Google Gemini, their AI tool, and sort of put online shopping and even video generation in there, do aggregated longer AI answers, which I should say, even Gemini, which is used by a lot of people, makes a lot of mistakes. They aggregate bad aggregators. They will link to TikToks and Reddit threads and present that as a fact. And it, that stinks in the information.
But they'll get better really quickly, though. You're
get better.
Right, but
it'll get better. But the, people don't dig deeper past page one, even in the search era. So, news sites are going to get downranked even farther. People are going to be reading these aggregated summaries, which stinks. But, the ad-supported media heyday of, a decade ago, 15 years ago, this is one more nail in the coffin for them, because they're just not going to get traffic if Gemini is aggregating these sites and others.
Oh, totally. These are incredibly challenged brands, and the challenges are only going to get more and more significant, and their business models have to change because they were built for scale, right? And the horizons, sort of continue to dim about, what that scale could look like. But I also want to say, Peter, and, everyone is proud of the Vox exit, even though obviously this is, they're 30% of their previous valuation, because it was a noble exit. But you got to remember they're moving into a consortium of brands that's also quite complex. And actually, Jim has talked about this as well. James Murdoch's Lupus Systems owns Art Basel. They're creating this sort of new thought leadership event that he and his wife are working on, and they've made a smattering of media investments in the past. I think they have money in the Bulwark. They had money in Vice. Obviously, that didn't work, and they do want their assets to be able to be interconnected in some way or other. I think the facile hypothesis has been that like Scott and Kara will start to turn up at Basel. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can tell you that we talked before about the combination of the Vox assets in the previous iteration not being a sort of 1 + 1 = 3 situation. I'm not sure that this is either. One of the most telling moments to me, I listened to Pivot on Friday, was Scott and Kara both described their relationship to the Vox audio business a little bit differently. And it's a private company, so we'll never know. But I always assumed that Vox owned Pivot because they created it, and then Scott and Kara renegotiated years later in success to make millions off the show by getting a cut of the ad revenue. But Kara made clear that they owned it, which was news to me. Scott then called it a joint venture, which is a little bit different. But these things are really going to matter in the future, because I assume that the way that that the audio business has become a real flywheel is you get a couple shows with scale, and then in order to buy into those, you have to buy into other shows in the network. Just simple network effects. It's a tactic. Again, I'm not in the business. I don't know this. But what happens?
You are now.
No, I'm not.
Look at us. Here
I
on
don't stand,
YouTube.
No, I don't stand in. I don't stand inside their business, so inside their company. So I don't know precisely what they're seeing. But they found a way to make that work for them.
Yeah.
I don't know if the. I guess I wonder aloud whether the motives of the owner, Murdoch in this case, will throw them. I hope it doesn't throw them off what has been a very successful sales motion in creating these shows, because I just don't see how bringing in some of these other assets are going to be accretive to these assets. But we're going to get to watch it in real time, and I think part of the reason why the press has been so positive about this sale is a like kind of reformed James Murdoch. I think Lupa means she-wolf. There's some sort of like Freudian twist in all this. He seems like a good owner, and Bankoff is staying with this too. So I think that there's a sense that they're at least not going to destroy the valuable assets here, and that is a win for humanity.
A win for humanity. Thank you, John, for that. Let's go to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Jeff Bezos digging in his heels about the Washington Post needing to be profitable. He told that to our pal Andrew Ross Sorkin a few days ago. I'm also going to get John's thoughts on why the CEO of Business Insider is departing after just 2 years when we come back. Welcome back to the Powers That Be, everybody. It's Media Monday. I'm talking digital media with the boss man, Jon Kelly. John, late last week, the CEO of Business Insider announced that she is leaving the company, which has been shedding jobs over the years. They've changed their name from Business Insider to Insider, back to Business Insider. I think most of it is paywalled. This is Reuters right here. I'm reading their lead. Barbara Peng will leave the media company by the end of next month to pursue new opportunities created by technological change, she said on Wednesday. What does that mean? And also, Axel Springer owns Business Insider, and Matthias Döpfner has been very involved in pressing Politico, for example, to get new leadership in there and freshen it up. He's an active owner, I will say. What do you think his role in this was too?
Well, what it all means is they fired her, and they're trying. They're kind of trying, but not trying to spin it delicately. the company's been in trouble for a long time,
Yeah,
right?
seriously.
I mean, a long time. It was BI is sort of famous in our world, Peter, for really a perfectly timed sale. I think that it's sort of a fable in the media industry now. Matthias wanted the FT, lost it to Nikkei. Sounds like he went to his bankers and said, "What's the next best thing?" And they bought out BI for a takeout price around $500 million. And I think for people of our generation, we appreciated the hustle of BI. I remember when Henry was running it with his protege Nick Carlson. It had this sort of spunky the content. I hate that word, but we all have to use it. The content was never good. It was
Some of it was sloppy, man. I'm going to say there are some stories out there that they did a great job promoting that were a little iffy.
Oh, yeah.
Thinly sourced, etc. But it presented as a premium brand. So
I don't see, and I think that I can't go that far, right? I think it was like kids' table fodder, right? But they were fast and they were able to. It had a humor to it. And it was traffic gold, really, is what it was. I actually remember like 10 years ago going to BI, maybe 12 years ago. This is around the time when everyone thought that Tim Cook was trying to come up with a Tesla competitor. And the homepage of BI just said, Apple Car 26 or something like that. And I remember thinking, like, at the end of the day, media is supposed to give you a feeling, a connection. And, like, they knew how to do that. But at the end of the day, the same changes we discussed that overtook the Vox subscale brands, overtook BI. It could never convince any business professional that it was a credible brand to help you do your job, right? It's not the Wall Street Journal. It's not the FT. It's not Dealbook. Its real secret sauce was that it was a bunch of really high metabolism kids who were able to sort of synopsize more credible sources like Bloomberg and the FT and the Journal really, really quickly and make it enjoyable for a younger generation. And Blodgett, because he had worked, in his career had been as an equity research analyst, he was able to marry his background and his sort of prestige with, despite that little snafu with the SEC, with the sort of mass credibility that BI had, and they were able to at first sell that to a new generation of non-digital native advertising partners. Brands like J.P. Morgan had a hard time finding their footing on the web, right? And reaching young, wealthy consumers. BI was a perfect platform for them. So Henry was able to make that happen. I thought he'd be there forever. It seemed like they wanted him to, but then when the technology started to change, social started to go away, Google Zero was around the corner. Henry left. They brought in Barbara, who I know a little bit, who's incredibly smart. She, I think, realized quickly the size and scope of the challenge that they had to change a lot, right? That Bill Ackman story gave them a convenient off-ramp to move out of Nick Carlson, who was a Henry acolyte and a sort of non-traditionally trained journalist who had a lot of the kind of vim and vigor of early BI, but was not going to be someone who made them more credible to elite professionals, which is really what they wanted at scale. He was sort of the architect of these long workplace like the Dave Portnoy kind of stories. Anyway, Barbara brought in someone from the Journal. I have no opinion on her. I've never met her, but they could not stop the bleeding. I don't think this is her fault. Again, I'm not inside the company, so I can't tell you if she was not executing certain tactics or strategies that the Axel overlords wanted her to. But I think what they had here is a brand that got too big, pulling a lot of levers at its disposal, and is now the tide is rolling out, and it's going to shrink significantly. And if I had to ask you, Peter, in a word, like, what does BI stand for? Could you think of a word or a phrase?
No, it just was not. It just never knew what it was in the first place to itself, other than sort of chasing traffic and being, like you said, fast. And it looked nice, but it just was not in my media diet.
Yeah.
In part because it didn't feel essential. And by the way, this is when I was working at Snapchat too.
Sure. Yeah.
Like back in the day in New York when they were popping. I didn't feel like I needed to go there. I would pay for the Wall Street Journal. I would read Axios, but I don't know. I'm probably the wrong person to ask, but I have a hunch that someone sitting behind a Bloomberg terminal would probably give you the same answer as me right now.
And many in between. I mean, you should ask Katie's friends from Anderson, right? Like I think that the challenge, like the reason they moved Barbara out are simple. Traffic is down exorbitantly. Subscribers are down, from the high 100,000, nearly 200,000 down to like 115 or something like that. It's been significant, and I don't know if that's Barbara's fault though, because I think they have a product that at the end of the day, when we were in the previous segment, we were talking about some of the Vox subscale brands. What do they have in common? They're not great, and that's the challenge with BI. It is the kids' table trying to do the adult dinner, and that's really hard.
So that brings me to, we don't have that much time left, but I do want to ask you about being great and being in demand and what people want. Because Jeff Bezos gave a semi-rare interview about the Washington Post the other day. It wasn't about the Washington Post, but he sat down with Andrew Ross Sorkin on CNBC, and Andrew pressed him about the Washington Post and their layoffs. 300 journalists left last year, of course. They did win a Pulitzer this year. Good for them. He has said in the past that the paper needs to be profitable, and it has to be something that people want. And I want to read to you Bezos' comments to Andrew, quote, "If people won't pay for our product, it's not a good enough product. Doing it would be like poetry without rhyming. It's too easy. So it's got to be something that people will pay for, because that's a signal. It's a signal that we're providing a relevant service." Now, he did make a funny comment too, that our investigative team is bigger than it was during Watergate and the Pentagon paper. Okay, that was like half a century ago. No shit. Here's where, I don't think people would accuse me of being, a management defender, but there are a lot of people out there who want Bezos to prop up the Post as a philanthropic enterprise, for the good of the country. Certainly a lot of employees, current and former, believe that. And by the way, he kind of did since buying the paper in 2013. But man, John, you don't remember this, but in 2018 or 19, I wrote an Odyssey level article for The Hive that you and Landy unfortunately had to edit, where I just really planted a flag, this long before the creator economy that everyone's obsessed with right now, about how attention is what matters for journalism, and how, certain politicians are starting to get this, but you have to be relevant, because if no one is paying for your stuff, I think Bezos is right. I mean, he's taking more of a bottom line perspective than I am. I'm thinking about the sort of attentional aspects of this, but you can't just write news for your little ivory tower set and where you're all reading it like each other, and you're trying to impress your friends and bosses in Washington and New York, etc. People in quote unquote flyover country have to care. People who are in their feeds and algorithms, it has to grab them. You have to go out in the same way a politician has to bend the narrative toward themselves and grab voters and pull them to their campaign. Journalism has to do that as well, if you really want to participate in a healthy civil society. And again, Bezos is making this argument that we've got subscribers are going to be the mark for proving that. But I sympathize with his argument here. I'm curious what you think, real quick, before
he's right. He's right. He's been right all along. It's not a nonprofit. And by the way, the worst thing he could do was would be to 501c3 this thing, because that'd be in the least best interest of the Washington Post and its employees long term. They'd make less money. They'd be less certain. They'd have no incentive for product market fit. I'm bewildered that he's getting flogged for this sort of commentary, when it's obvious that the people who work there and have to make a product that's accountable to the audience that wants to consume it. Jeff Bezos, one of the most powerful guys in the history of the world, but he can't fix this for them. They have to fix this themselves. And actually, I feel like when he talks about it, you can see some of the bewilderment in his eyes. That if he made another point in that interview too, Peter, about how we wouldn't be using Amazon if we got our toilet paper in 6 weeks, right? It works because you order it on a Sunday night and it arrives Monday before noon. And no one's saying the Washington Post has to do that, but they have to make a good product in an increasingly competitive landscape. And guess what, guys? the future is not going to look like the past. In some ways, the worst thing that ever happened to the Post was it had this extraordinary moment, with Watergate and the Pentagon Papers and the Graham family. Like, it's but that holds them back more than it propels them forward.
I mean, I always use the Georgetown basketball analogy with the Washington
Yeah,
Post.
you're right.
Because we're
You're
still
right.
dining out on the past, without making investments in the future, facilities, the best players, recruits, etc. Like, you can't. Every time you watch a Georgetown game on television, the announcers are like, "Oh yeah, the heyday of the Big East," and they cut to some B-roll of John Thompson and Patrick Ewing, and it's like so irrelevant to today.
Yes,
And
more
they
than
were
40
losing.
years
Anyway,
ago.
weird analogy. The Post doesn't even cover Georgetown basketball anymore. But one more quick note on the Bezos interview. I noticed this, John. He's 62 years old. I live in Los Angeles. I see aging men trying to stay young.
You do.
Adam Mosseri.
You
from
might be
Instagram
one of them.
This is why I'm saying this. You see me on YouTube. I'm not wearing a necklace right now. Okay.
The necklace was crazy, and so was the beard shave line. Did you see that? Unbelievable.
Yeah,
By the
it's
way,
like-
we have to get Andrew new shoes too, but we can worry about that offline.
As someone who cares about clothes, Lauren Sherman called me a good dresser one time, and I still hold on to that.
You look
Like,
good.
dude, don't wear a chain. Adam Mosseri was wearing a chain in this Instagram video the other day. He's my age. He's 43, 44. But, like, Zuckerberg obviously had that big one on. The only fashion accessory a man needs is a nice watch. Okay?
I agree with
Bezos
that.
looked terrible with that necklace. Just take it off, man.
He's
That's my comment.
crazy. Oh my god.
Crazy. He's crazy. Whatever. Anyway, John, good to see you. I will see you tomorrow right here for Media Tuesday with Jon Kelly. Thanks, buddy.
All right, man. I'll see you at Politics O'Clock.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of The Powers That Be. As a reminder, The Powers That Be is the official podcast of Puck. We'd like to thank Ben Landy, Liz Goff, and Alex Bigler for their editorial and production guidance. If you like what you hear, please share with a friend. It really helps us keep delivering the inside scoop that only Puck can offer. Follow us on Twitter at Puck News. This has been a presentation of Odyssey. Please listen, rate, review, and follow all episodes wherever you get your podcasts. The Powers That Be Daily is executive produced by Jon Kelly, co-founder of Puck, Bob Tabador, and Ben Landy, executive editor at Puck.